Hello everybody, this is Graham Anderson, and today I'm going to be looking at Luna Capital. Now in this game you're going to be taking on the role of a group of colonists trying to build a new colony on the moon. And the colony that is the most efficient and the most impressive moon station will become the new lunar capital. Now this game definitely has a retro future look to it. It even states in the blurb in the box that this is actually 1977 and we're in the midst of establishing a new colony on the moon. So I think that's a pretty interesting idea. The game uses a mechanism that we've seen many times before, especially in city building. There are certain cards paired with tokens to be taken from the middle of the table. If you take a certain card, then you also have to take the tokens underneath that card. You'll then have to place a card and all of the tokens you just picked up somewhere in your colony. Now of course there are restrictions on what can go where and what cards you can place, and the tokens will be the main way to score points. So of course you have to decide which is more important, getting a card that you want so you can play, or getting the tokens you want to be able to score later on in the game. So will this game blast off to the new heights of excellence, or will it just be left on the launch pad? Let's get it to the table, see how it's played, then we'll come back for my final thoughts on Luna Capital.
So here we have Luna Capital set up for 3 players. Shuffle the 3 decks of cards separately, the construction cards, the short-term concessions, and the long-term concession cards. Each player receives 3 random construction cards along with their sponsored tile and the 3 matching tokens. Place 4 construction cards on the main board face up, and the last delivery token in the spot closest to the draw deck. Draw 2 short-term and 1 long-term concessions and place them face up above the board. The Selenite robot tokens and the logistics redistribution tokens are placed in the reserves. The project tiles are separated by phase, A, B, and C. Mix each phase separately and place the phase A in the holder. Place 1 project tile face up under each construction card. The first player is given the first player marker, then starting with the last player and going counterclockwise, each player has the opportunity to exchange a card from their hand with one of the construction cards on the main board. The main scoring in the game is going to be based on the project tiles that you build, so let's quickly look at them. The vital systems will score based on each one's largest orthogonally connected group. The greenhouses will score like the vital systems, that is the largest group of each type, and they will additionally give you points for sets of the 3 different colors. In the construction set, there are the HAB mods, which will score 2 points for the indicated types of vital systems that are immediately around it in the 8 squares. The residential complexes will score 1 point for each of the indicated types anywhere in your settlement. And the moon landing grounds won't score you any points, but when placed allow you to draw 3 construction cards and keep 1. The sales office will just score you 2 points at the end of the game. The demolition can be placed on any space. It covers up the existing tile or printed element on the card. This space is now considered empty and can be built upon later. Selenite robots, when this tile is placed, you're going to take 2 robots from the reserve. They will allow a player on a future turn, when they play a card, to place a robot on the number to ignore the number on that card. You'll see why that's important as I go through the gameplay. Meteorites. The person with the most meteorites at the end of the game will get a bonus based on the number of players. And finally, the logistics redistribution tiles. When taken, is placed on an empty site in their settlement, and you take 1 logistics redistribution token to be used later. On a future turn, the player can spend 1 of these tokens to swap 2 project tiles on the main board. So on to the gameplay. On a player's turn, they will take 1 of the 4 construction tiles from the main board, along with all the project tiles underneath the card. The card is then added to their hand, and if the card chosen is belonging to the last delivery token, they must also discard a card from their hand. Next, the player must play 1 construction card from their hand. To place a card, it must follow the 4 following conditions. It cannot be placed covering any other portion of a card. From the second card onward, each card must be placed to the left, right, above, or below a previously played card. That means at least 2 corners of the new card must touch 2 corners of an existing card. And once it is being played, it cannot be moved or rearranged. There can be a maximum of 3 rows of cards, and each row must increase from left to right, as each construction card is numbered from 1 to 10. Now if you cannot place any cards due to these rules, you must place a card face down, meeting all the other requirements, and the number will not be visible. You will also not be able to play any project tiles on this face down card. Once a card has been played, you must place all the project tiles you have in front of you, and they can go on any cards that have an empty space, not just the one you just played. Some cards already have projects on them, so they are considered non-empty sites and cannot be built over. Now there are 2 exceptions to that rule. The construction sites can be built over lunar scaffolding, and anything can be built on a demolition project. When the player has finished, they will draw a new card for the construction card row, place the last delivery token above the card they just replaced, and add the number of projectiles equal to the current round, 1, 2, 3, or 4. At the end of the round, that is when it's the first player's turn again, before they take their turn, they will add 1 projectile under each construction card. So in the first round, there will always be 1 projectile under each card. In round 2, there will be 2, etc. At the end of the 4th round, the current phase ends. At the end of the phase, each player will see if they fulfilled one of the short or long-term concession cards that's still available. If they have, and do not already have a token on it, they'll place one of their tokens on it. Now it is possible for multiple players to place their tokens on a concession at the end of a phase, but as soon as a concession has at least 1 player token on it, it will no longer be available to other players for the rest of the game. Next, you remove all remaining projects, but keep the construction cards. Remove leftover projectiles from the tower and take the next phase tiles and place 1 face up under each construction card and place the rest in the tower. The first player markers then pass to the next player. After phase C is complete, you go to final scoring. Since I already talked about the tiles, I'm going to quickly go through the scoring. You'll score for each of your largest orthogonally adjacent vital systems of each type. Your greenhouses will also score for each set of pears, apples, and lemons that you have in your settlement. The player with the most meteorites will score a bonus, as will the second place player in this 3-player game. Each sales office will score you 2 points. The constructions will score the hab mods for the tiles directly around it, and the residential complexes for the tiles anywhere in your settlement. Any cards left in your hand will be worth 3 points, and finally each concession that you're able to complete during the game is going to be worth the points printed on it. And the player with the most points is the winner. Let's get back to see what I thought about Luna Capital.
So on to theme components. The theme was actually kind of interesting. It's just a standard city building theme. It just so happens to be on the moon. The idea of the future retro was interesting, and they carried it all throughout the game, which of course is really nice to see. And what you're doing in the game, claiming spots on the moon and building structures in certain ways, kind of makes thematic sense. I mean, if you're going to be building greenhouses on the moon, you probably want all the same plants together, so that made thematic sense. So theme, although I didn't find it overly interesting, it did work. Now on to the components. First off, I do like the art and the aesthetics of this game. All the components in the box carry the same look. From the cards to the cardboard components to the wooden pieces, they all look like they're part of the same universe. I also really like some of the additional touches that they gave to the game. The card holder. It's not needed, but it is nice to have. The building to hold all the projectiles. Again, another nice touch. And even in the box, there's a cardboard holder for all the projectiles. And I did find that everything fit back into the box no problem, so I never had to need to dismantle the cardboard pieces once they've been put together. So all in all, really nice job on the components. Except, and this is a pretty big one for me after teaching this game several times, why, with all those extra pieces in the box that are not needed, do we not have a scoring sheet for each player? Just a simple card I could give out to people to remind them how things scored, or an explanation of the iconography. I would have gladly given up some of those extras in the box for just cards I could hand out to players so they remembered how each thing scored. That was frustrating, and for me it's something that they majorly overlooked. But let's go on to the gameplay. Now I've seen a few games like this in the past little while where you take a combination of card plus what's paired with it, and you know what? It's a fun, simple mechanism. Now this game does add a few twists. The card placement restrictions and those scoring concession cards. So the base mechanisms work very well. Deciding which card and project pairing to take is a fun mechanism. There's hardly ever a perfect pairing out there, so you're always trying to figure out, what's more important to me this turn. The card for its placement and what's on the card, or those paired projects for scoring. And this is actually one small issue I did have with the game. The card placement piece. I do wish that there was a way to flush the cards in the card row. Often people I played with would ignore certain cards for most of the round, and there was not a way to kind of flush them out. And I realize that's probably part of the game design, but I just... Now, I do like the last delivery marker. That means you have to discard a card to take the combo, the newest combo. So having useless cards in your hand can be used for that, but you're going to be running out of cards. You're never getting new cards into your hand, as every time you take a card, you have to play a card every round. So you've got 3 spares. Now you can always play a card face down, but then you can't place any projects on that card. I felt this a little strange and maybe a little too restricted for this way of game, and I really can't put my finger on it. I like the idea, but the implementation just didn't feel right. I'm thinking I would have preferred to have your cards increase from left to right as almost like a bonus you could get. And if I took the decision to break that streak, then I wouldn't get the bonus. Or maybe I get a bonus for the longest unbroken streak of cards. The way the card placement works in the game now, I'm okay with it because you do have the flexibility to add cards that may not have a card to the left or right, as long as there's a card, above or below it. So you can almost drop a card into the empty spot. But like I said, I like the idea. I'm just not fully sure that these restrictions work. So the second twist on the game is those concession scoring cards. And it's not the cards themselves. We've all seen these cards where you get a bonus to achieve something. It's the idea that they're no longer going to be claimed once the round is over, assuming at least one person has claimed it. It's not like you're going to be receiving a lesser amount in later phase. It's that you're not going to get anything for it. It does mean that you have to be watching what the other players are doing and making sure you're not a few steps behind them to be able to claim that concession at the end of the round. Like the card placement rules, I don't have a fundamental problem with it, but it kind of butts up against the simplicity of the gameplay. On one hand, you have a very nice, light, approachable game where you take a card and projects, you play them to get points and achieve the concessions. I like that part. But I'm not sure I'm a big fan of pairing it with those two extra things that this game adds. I like the idea, just maybe not in this weight of game. I kind of feel this game really doesn't know what it wants to be. Is it intended to be a nice, light, welcoming game? If so, the restrictness of those card placement and the concession scoring seems to be slightly at odds to that. Or is it intended to be a more middleweight game then? If so, the card placement and concession feels right for that, but then there's not a lot of depth to the gameplay. I mean, turn 1 feels pretty much the same as turn 12. Yes, you're going to be getting more projectiles, but the same idea is the same. So would I recommend this game? This one is tough for me to say. I think if the people you play games with usually tend to want to play lighter, quick, welcoming games, and maybe want to be pushed a little bit, then I would say yes, I would recommend it. Now, if you fall outside of that very specific group of people, then this should definitely be a try before you buy. I do really, really like the components and the art in this game, even if the cards are a little plain. And especially, I do wish that there was a player cheat sheet. I like that the basic mechanism of the game, every time it's my turn, I have something to think about. What card do I want? What projects? Can I live with a really good card, but it might mess up some of my scoring opportunities in the rounds, especially when you're having to take 4 projects. Because you have to take and place all 4. Deciding on what that perfect pick is for you at any point is something I really enjoyed. I like the idea of the last delivery piece. Now, that sounds like a small thing, but the idea that you have to give up a card to take that pairing is interesting because you can only do it so many times during the game. So again, weighing that is an important piece of the gameplay. Now, I actually do like the card restrictions and the concession scoring, but, and this is my major negative to the game, I feel like they don't really fit into the weight of game that I wanted this to be. And I'm really not sure how much they add to the gameplay. I am assuming that they were added to make the game stand out from the other city building games. I'm not sure that they were successful in that. So if you take those 2 items out of the equation, you're left with a kind of pretty standard city building game that, while is enjoyable, I kind of feel is ultimately forgettable. So I'm going to give this game a 6.5 out of 10. I do want to stress, this is not a bad game by any imagination. I did enjoy my plays of it, but I kind of felt there was nothing here that I'm dying to get back to the table. When it hit the table, I enjoyed playing it. But I kind of have other games with the same basic mechanisms with twists that I would probably pull off the shelf before I pull this one out. So unfortunately, it's kind of a pass for me, but of course your mileage may vary. And that's it for the moment. So until next time, thanks for watching.